Hello guys, here is a Heritage Specter ceiling fan from 2003. This is a Seabrook Hill branded fan, but it's more or less a Heritage, just under a different brand. So, I got this fan a while back, before I even got my driver's license. I got this in very late 2023 or very early 2024. It's one of those two time periods. And I got this for $8 that in brand new in the box. So, and unfortunately, this fan had a kind of a sad story. This fan was defective in the box. And it was because the motor on this wouldn't work. And this is the one and only Heritage fan I have seen that had a motor failure. I mean, I've been a long running fan of Heritage fans. I love Heritage fans ever since I could remember. I remember they were under some different brands like Comfort Air and Home Essentials back in the late 2000s and early 2010s when they were still sold new. And I just love Heritage fans simply because of nostalgia, and I think they're pretty respectable fans. I know a lot of people think they're horrible, but I personally don't think they're horrible at all. Judging that this fan right here was the only one I've seen dead and it was new in the box, I really think Heritage fans are pretty respectable. And this was defective, yes, as I've said, but defective fans happen with other brands too. It doesn't just happen with Heritage. It happens with Regency, it happens with Hunter, it happens with Harbor Breeze, it even happens to Casablanca. Defects happen every once in a while. It's very unfortunate, but it does happen. So, to the people who hate Heritage fans, who love to go into the comments box and say, oh, this is dead, you should just destroy it. Or, where's the destruction video? Why don't you just throw it in a fire pit? I'm going to tell you guys this, and take this. Heritage fans, in my opinion, are pretty respectable economy fans. And, I mean, over the course of my lifetime, I've only seen one Heritage fan that failed, and it was this baby right here. And it was just defective, I think. So, yeah. I see Heritage fans all over the place, and they're all running 20 or 30 years later. So, yeah. Enough talking about that. Let's talk about how I fixed it. So, what I did is I eventually did find a 36-inch Heritage Specter, and I was thinking, ooh, that actually looks pretty cool. I might be able to fix up that one Heritage Specter that I have. So yeah, therefore I took the motor out of the 36-inch Heritage Specter and I put on this fan. I replaced the switch housings because the switch housings were different. I have the other switch housing for that fan, but I don't feel like retrieving it right now. I still have it, of course, but I just replaced the switch housing with the original one from the one that I replaced it with, which is this one, which is for the 42-inch Specter. And I just rewired the switches and everything, and I did put a different capacitor in there because the capacitor in this motor was starting to drift. So I put in a much higher quality 4 microfarad capacitor as opposed to the 3 microfarad capacitor which was originally in this motor. And I personally don't think that's going to kill the fan because I see other Heritage fans with a 4 microfarad capacitor at the same time period. And Heritage was a pretty cheap make, so I could imagine they use the exact same stator for all their fans. They just use different capacitors just so they would have the appropriate speed of which the motors go. So I personally don't think in this case that a 4 microfarad capacitor is going to kill the fan. I mean, changing a 3 microfarad to like a 10 microfarad, yeah, you're going to have a problem there, my guy. But replacing that capacitor with the 3 microfarad capacitor to the 4 in this case, I think will be totally fine. So yeah, the motor does spin slightly faster, but that's what's needed too because this fan uses slightly longer blades. And yeah, this fan, what's also really cool about this is that this fan has a reverse pull chain. And just to show you guys proof, I'll show you guys, this thing has 3 pull chains. See, there's 3 pull chains on this. So I think that's pretty cool. I'm having a hunch that this was a Canadian product because Canada was really the only country that had the 3 pull chains on their fans like this one. And yeah, and somehow it got to my state. It's definitely not inconceivable that it would happen because I live in Minnesota, and Minnesota, in Canada, is like an 8-hour drive away from me. Like, it's definitely not inconceivable that a Canadian fan actually did make it to the U.S. So, yeah. But without further ado, let's go ahead and start the demonstration. Here's the light. I'm using a 100-watt incandescent bulb. No DEL trash or anything like that. Let's start off on high. And I did do a calculation of the area. I'm gonna make sure I'm doing it right here. So it's high speed, and let's see here. I think we're gonna cut about a 6-inch wide circle in this. Let's see here. Yeah, I think we're going to cut a 6-inch circle from this. So our number is going to be 9.4. And to tell you guys how I did that, I took 42, divided it by 12. I get 3.5, divided it by 2. I'm going to round this up to 1.8. So 1.8 squared times pi. Our number, rounding to the nearest tenth, is 10.2. And we also have to subtract the circle in the middle where there is no airflow, in which case I'm going to use 6. So 6 divided by 12 is 0.5 squared times pi. Our number is 9.4, rounding to the nearest tenth. So 9.4 is the number. So let's go ahead and get a wind speed reading. Okay. Getting go with about stuck between 374 and 393. Okay, it's stuck at 393. We'll go with 393. 9.4 times 393. 3,694. So that, in my opinion, is a pretty respectable rating for a little cheap chintzy fan like this. And chintzy probably isn't a word I should be using since I really like Heritage fans, but you know, they are pretty cheap. But 3,694 CFM, that's, I think, very respectable for a fan like this. I mean, it's not a Hunter Beacon Hill, and it's not a Casablanca Lady Delta. It's not in that territory, but this is actually moving a pretty good, solid amount of air for something like this. And you got to realize, the price of these were about $20 or $25 back in the early 2000s when these were made. So when something is that cheap, that's, you know, that's pretty respectable. Or actually, I might take that back. Maybe this was closer to 30. But even then, I think $30, which would inflate, which $30 in 2003 would actually inflate to about 60 in today's money. I would say that if this was sold today for $60, I would definitely buy this. Would I buy eBay prices for one of these? Absolutely not. But $60, if this was sold today, I think that's a heck of a deal for something like this. Especially since today ceiling fan prices have gone through the roof. Now medium. Oh, I forgot to tell you guys the power consumption on high. Alright, let's see here. This thing is taking 53 watts and 0.44 amps. So 0.46 amps, I think, is what the rating on the original motor was. So I think putting a 4 microfarad capacitor in this motor is totally acceptable. Now we'll go to medium. And something worth noting of this fan, this thing, other than the airflow noise, is nearly silent. Again, when it comes to cheap, economy-grade ceiling fans, they're not always the most quiet. And this right here is quiet. That's another reason why I respect Heritage as much as I do. Because they are pretty quiet fans. And yes, that is another reason why I really just don't know why people have such a problem with Heritage. Yes, they were cheap. Yes, they don't move the greatest amount of air. Yes, there's definitely better out there. But for the price to performance ratio, you get a lot from this. Let's go ahead and do medium feet per minute. I think we'll go with we'll go with 256. So 256 times 9.4, 2,406 CFM. So I think that's pretty respectable for medium for a little 42-inch spinner. And we'll do power draw on medium as well. 34 watts and 0.3 amps on the nose. And now low. Let's see if we can get an airflow rating for low. I don't think we are going to be able to. Yeah, we're not going to be able to get a real wind speed rating for low. But we'll estimate this to be about, let's see here. We'll estimate this to be about 800 CFM. If not 700. We'll go with 700 for this. This is a very nice, calm low. Like, I would definitely say if you don't need a lot of airflow, but you just want a good, gentle draft, this, I think, is a pretty solid low speed. Not to mention, it's very quiet. And as I said this before, the fact that this is quiet really baffles me that people hate Heritage fans as much as they do. Let's see here. Power draw is 20 watts and 0.2 amps on the nose. So this thing is hardly humming at all, if that. So this is a very quiet fan on all 3 speeds. And that's not something that's with a lot of economy grade products. Usually, I shouldn't say usually, but there's some economy grade products that I've tested that probably costed more than this, but yet sound like a chainsaw. So that's another reason why I really just don't get why people hate Heritage fans so much. I mean, Heritage fans look halfway decent from an aesthetics perspective. This thing is very quiet. This thing moves a respectable amount of air. And yeah, I just don't get why people hate Heritage fans so much. Because Heritage fans, I've seen in many places, and even some pretty abusive places, and their motors are still working. There's an antique store I go to pretty often that has Heritage Alexa ceiling fans all over the place. And that store has a pretty high ceiling, about 11 or 12 feet. And they're hugger fans, so of course they don't really move much air, but they use them as if they're doing something. And also, I have a friend of mine from school that has Heritage fans all over their house. And they're in great shape, running perfectly 20 years later. And there's another place in particular that I remember of. There was another friend of mine from school that had a Heritage Furnace in white and brass in his bedroom. And that thing was pretty well bent up. It was like, I think one was reverse pitched, one was like a complete 45-degree blade pitch. And that fan is still smooth and quiet as the day it was new. So yeah, all these Heritage fans I've seen in my lifetime, they've been in service for decades. And they're still working perfectly. So I don't understand why people have such a problem with these. And I've said this plenty of times before. I really feel like I'm saying it more often than I should, but I think Heritage fans are pretty respectable for the cost to performance ratio perspective. Terrible fans, in my opinion, would be stuff like the Panama Gear Driven or any of the Friction Drive series. Those fans, I mean, if money and rarity, or let's say, okay, if rarity and vintage were not common problems, and if you wanted to talk about really cheap piece of garbage ceiling fans, the Panama Gear Driven ceiling fan and the Friction Drive ceiling fans whether it's Newtone, Sears, or any of those other friction drives, they're awful fans. They're very loud, they don't move a lot of air, and the prices, I think I would call a scam. But something like this, it was not some stupid commercial fad or stupid gimmicks. This was just built down to a price and built down reasonably. And the things that were built down to a price were done so within reason. This thing's not ugly at all. And it's just a motor with blades, so you don't have stupid flywheels breaking. You don't have stupid electronic controls breaking. And this uses just a regular typical ball and socket mounting system, and it will not fall. So yeah, that's my point here. This thing actually moves a lot of air and it's very quiet. You don't get either one of those with the friction drive fans or the Panama gear driven fans. I mean, the friction drives and the Panama gear driven fans, if they were sold in my area, I'd buy them, of course, because they're rare. But like I said, they are terrible fans. And if rarity and vintage were not a common thing, I would say they would be appropriate to destroy them because they're very crappy, and for the price they were sold, they're pretty abysmal. I mean, of course, don't destroy a Panama gear driven fan, and don't destroy a friction drive in real life, but I'm just saying, like, if you wanted to talk about really cheap piece of garbage fans, those fans, the friction drives and the gear drives, would definitely be on that list. But not Heritage. And also, guys, before I end the video, I'm going to turn this fan back to high, and I'll show you guys it on reverse. Normally, I don't do it, but since this has a reverse chain, I'll show you guys proof that the reverse chain still works. That is cool. I always really like the ceiling fans with the reverse pull chain. And maybe it's just because I, as an American, don't see them very often. A Canadian, that's kind of typical to them. But I, of course, am an American, so I don't see that very often. There's only one ceiling fan I've seen with a reverse pull chain that I've seen out in the wild. And that is like an SMC ceiling fan, kind of with a Littleton style housing. And I remember I was very fascinated by the reverse pull chain that it had. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop the fan here. And before I end the video, I'll show you guys the box it would have came in. And I can get through my shop here, because my shop is a mess right now. I just need to get the time to clean it. So I have the box right here. Here it is. Look, Seabrook Hill Collection. Limited 20-year warranty. You know, at the time that I got this fan, I may have been able to have sent it to a warranty, but unfortunately it's largely expired. And this is some claims on here that I find pretty interesting, particularly this one. 42-inch, 106 centimeter, which is for Canada, by the way, 5-blade dual mount ceiling fan. I'm going to count the blades. 1, 2, 3, 4. I only count 4 blades. And then right on the bottom it says 4 white blades. Look, it says 4 blade, 5 blade. I find that pretty humorous. 3-speed setting with reverse switch for year-round use. That's a pretty gimmicky feature. But that's with all fans. Single mushroom fan light, that's pretty presentable. Multi-stock capacitor for quiet, efficient operation. Yeah, that is pretty quiet fan. And yeah. And also, another thing I see here is the SKU number starts at 355. So this heavily implies that this is a Menards product, because Menards has sold plenty of heritage fans over the years as well, back in the 90s and the 2000s. For those who want to see the front of the box, I'll show you it here. This is the box that I've been keeping my CDs in, by the way. But now that I'm able to use this fan, I'm planning to use this box. So yeah, here it is right here. Do you remember light bulb? Light bulb sold separately. Yeah, no kidding. And there you have it, my 2003 Seabrook Hill /Heritage Specter ceiling fan. Thank you. Have a nice day.